Hi.
My name is Sarah Gergel, and I work with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how COVID-19 has impacted various communities in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County. Today is May 10th, 2023, and this week there were 24 reported cases of COVID-19 in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County area, which shows a 57% decrease over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, each subject is comfortable now wearing a mask. Mona, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Mona Siblani. I came to the United States in 1984 from Lebanon in the Middle East. And I came as a student, remained a student almost until I got married in 1997. I obtained my PhD in higher education, and I now live in Charlotte. I got my degree from Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, and I now live with my husband and two daughters in Charlotte, Mecklenburg area, and I am not employed. Actually, I'm semi-retired. I only worked few years in my life because I married later in life, and then I had my second child had severe illness, and they told me that she won't live past 3 years old, and now she's 22, so she kind of made it, but she is on a wheelchair. She cannot, move most of her, body. And she needed, because they told me that, I decided to stay home and take care of her. And my husband, worked and provided for the family, and he still does. And now my older daughter is working at Chapel Hill. She works remotely, and I also about 10 years ago, that I got a double lung transplant at Duke up in Durham, and thank goodness I'm doing okay. But there are things that make me worry about the future, and I worry about the present and the future, and that's about it. Now, do you want me to talk about?
Yeah. So, before we move on, would you tell me what you look like?
Yes, I look like a typical Middle Eastern woman. I have, brown eyes, and of course I had brown hair, and I kind of colored it. And I have bags under my eyes, which I really don't care for at all. And, I'm kind of overweight a little bit, and that's about it.
And you're wearing a beautiful scarf today.
Okay, thank you.
And you look so lovely.
Thanks.
So thank you, Mona.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter, but also so thankful that she's...
Yeah, she's
yeah. And you mentioned that you went to Wayne State University?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm from Michigan, too.
Oh.
So how long did you live in Dearborn?
I lived my whole family, now live in Dearborn or Dearborn High. But I lived in Detroit because, I lived on campus.
Oh, okay.
But, before I lived in Dearborn, when I was doing my master's, I lived in Dearborn. But during my PhD, I found it so hard to go and come, So, yeah.
And what did you study?
I went for my master's, I did linguistics. And for my PhD, I did higher education. I went to the education.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
No problem.
Do you want to That's for you.
Usually nobody calls me.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Oh, scam like. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much,
No
Mona.
problem.
So, and you've been living in Charlotte for how long?
It's 25 years actually.
Wow,
25
that's
plus.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Time flies.
Yes, yes. So tell me a little bit about, before we started talking, we did an activity together called a hand map.
Yes.
Is there anything from your hand map that you would like to share with us?
I like to share that, I have a lot of friends that helped me, in my life, not only during COVID, but before.
Yeah.
And my family is super, my husband is okay, thank goodness, and my daughters, are loving and caring human beings, thank goodness about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, thank you.
And can you tell me a little bit about your experience over the last 3 years?
Okay, so when COVID cases started becoming, in the beginning, we didn't take it seriously, but I had to go for a visit to Durham for my lung. Like I get every 3 months. Every 3 months or 4 months, I used to go up, and my doctors, were very concerned, and they told me that they are preparing for something big, and to take good precautions and stuff. So when I came down and I told them, and things started, like people talking about it and everywhere in the world, and so we started. My husband started looking at. So they told them at work. He worked for a bank, and they told them to stay home, and so he stayed home, and he almost drove us nuts because he was looking at the chart on TV all the time, almost, and and then in Lebanon and overseas, the people started also to get concerned, but they. Being the situation deteriorated in Lebanon earlier because, a lot of people there are a lot of people from Syria and other countries that live there, and they come and go, and there are also a lot of people that travel. Most of the Lebanese live abroad, not in Lebanon.
Okay.
Almost every family, and they go and visit their families, and they brought a lot of that cases to Lebanon, and I was starting to worry about them, and then my daughters took it to the extreme. They, like, every piece of equipment or that came, or something for my daughter, it has to be wiped. They would put a tarp in the garage, and me and my other daughter, the one who was handicapped, we never get to go out and shop or do anything or let anybody come and visit us for 6 months. I'm talking, we did not get out at all. One time, I walked around, with my other daughter, and we saw our neighbor, and we talked to her, but that about it. Everything was on the phone, and if somebody wanted to come bring food to us or bring anything, or we want to go and drop something for other people, we take so much precautions. And even, like a year later, when people were, started to go out, do little activities together, my daughters, like my friend had a small wedding for her daughter, and she invited me and my daughters, both of my daughters, like, oh, no way, And I had told her I would come, and she was really upset. But I told her, you don't understand how they kind of rule in my house, my daughters. They were so worried, And then, thank goodness, me and my daughter, who are, we have low immunity.
Yeah.
Actually, I have very compressed immunity, and because of her disease, also she has very low immunity.
Yeah.
We were so concerned, and I mean, others were concerned about us, and they would call and they begged me not to go anywhere, not to see anybody. And then in Lebanon, we they are in my family, extended family. In my extended family, there is a family that is that was made of 9 children. Of course, their kids. Their parents passed away. They were all older, and one of them passed away of COVID, and they attended his funeral. Actually, they didn't bury him themselves. They had some people with hazard suits and stuff. And then they had, would have a get together. They're a big family. Their kids are married. And my nieces and nephews, they attended the funeral too. Mm-hmm. And then later, I was so concerned, but then they said, no, we didn't see him. We didn't, And then later, one after another of his siblings started dying. So at the end, the 7 out of 9 died of COVID, and we were.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like so concerned about my family in Lebanon, and then they would say, "Don't worry, we're not going anywhere." But I knew that for every funeral they had to go, and they said we're staying. It was like a horrible experience. And, a lot of people, that friends of friends, passed away. And, like at that time when they were passing away, it took a while for the vaccines to get there. So there was nothing they could do, except, making sure that. So thank goodness, my family, they all went out of Beirut because, it's so confined and so, so they went out, and we still have our house, my parents' house up in Lebanon, and I'm up in the mountains. Okay. And they stayed there almost the whole time, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then my brother, who lived here for 32 years, decided he wanted to go to Lebanon and help my other brother, because I only have one brother and one sister, and the other sister died of my lung disease a while ago. So her family still lived there. Yeah, so we were so worried about that. Yeah. And they were worried about me and my daughter. Everybody in the community was worried about me and my daughter. Said that, please take care. And thank goodness, me and my daughter, we didn't get COVID. But my husband and my other daughter, they got it.
You did?
Yes, we also, but the only one thing is that nobody came to help me with Anna, with my daughter, because they were, they were concerned. And then, we waited for the agency to send us somebody, for like 2 years, and they didn't. So they said, well, she's of age now where you can take the money, not the agency, and you can find yourself. And we thought that was easy, but up till now, we can't find somebody to come and help me out for like few hours while my husband is working,
Really?
Because I can't carry her.
Yeah.
And my other daughter is tiny, and also she cannot carry her. She's about 75 pounds. And, and it's really hard. And now we ordered the lift for her, because in the beginning she refused the lift. She said that she would fall, she was very concerned about the lift. They used it one time for her in school, when she was in school. Yeah. And she didn't like it whatsoever. But now, she's grown, and so we ordered it. Up till now, we didn't get it. But we will get it. Sorry. Yeah, I know. But maybe, so he has to help her, and then,
Yeah.
We help her otherwise, but there's somebody who has to bring her, take her to her commode, or bring her and put her on her chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Do you think the struggles that you've been having with finding help as well as the lift, do you think that has to do with COVID?
oh, 100%, because the only I think the agent, when we were still with the agency sent us one person. Usually they send three, because they want make sure that they have every day, for 4 hours or 5 hours, there is somebody. So after so long, they sent us one person who refused to take the vaccine, and my the clinic that she goes to, and my husband, and she said, no way I would accept anybody who does not have she was very worried, and she was worried about me too, with people not even though I did not tell them, but a lot of my friends did not take the vaccine and refused to take it. But I still saw them towards the end, not the first 8 months or so. Yeah.
So during that time that you were at home with your daughter and no contact with really
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
How did you live through that?
I know. Well, I have learned because of my condition, and I have learned to live with myself. I don't know how, but thank goodness also now we have social media, and we have TVs, and we have TVs that would entertain you more than before, because now before we had like 3 channels or 4 channels. So now I remember when I came in the 80s, there were very few channels, unless you want to pay a lot of money for cable, and then cable was not all that super. And now we have like a multitude of channels that we can flip through and see, And also, I relied also on my faith, and, like I read a lot of, my holy book, and time passes, you don't know how. Everything passes, And I was glad that my immediate family was not, so. And then even when they got COVID, they got very, it's like, it was like it was like a cold or, So, but even when they had that, they kind of restricted themselves to their room. My husband would not come to our room, at all.
Yeah.
And they used only one bathroom, and one their room. We have a guest room which my husband used. And they did that for 20 days. And if they came to the kitchen or to the common areas, they would wear masks all the time. Yeah. So we were very concerned, like maybe a little bit more than others, but. Because of our condition, me and my daughter, we don't have like good immunity system.
And your experience, I mean, that family friend for so many to pass away.
Yeah, and they had like six of them were boys, and one girl, one female, which never married, and she was a little older than me, but she every time I went there and I saw her, and she was like strong because she lived with all these boys. And I never in my life thought that she would like really get sick, because she could she could build a wall if you want with bricks and big stones and stuff. And she was so strong, but apparently that people did not take it seriously, Very few people took it seriously in our village. They said, oh, it's like one of those things that come and go, Yeah, but
can imagine.
Yeah, one of like the old people said, no, don't worry. We lived through cholera. We lived through this. We lived in the world, and then during that time also, the locusts came. I mean, it was like really horrible, and that's what happened after World War II. Like when they were about to breathe, the locusts came, but this time. For some reason, they came, and then some, I think, storks or some kind of like those people who, those birds that that eat them. They came from nowhere. It's like a story from. I know, not a lot of people believe that if they didn't live in Lebanon. Yeah, and luckily, their crops were saved. Otherwise, and my family depend on. My brothers, and then the brother that went from here, also he is into agriculture, and he kind of, even the land that we never planted, he planted and stuff. But the crops were saved, and then they decided they don't like Lebanon and they left or whatever.
They did.
They did. They left without so much damage.
Oh wow!
But every day I used to, in the morning I would pray so much before I look at my phone.
Yeah.
And say, okay, is there anybody else who's gonna die, of COVID? And here, also, my husband is Pakistani, and we have like a big, they call them Desi, the Indian, Pakistani, Bengali, in that subcontinent, they call them Desis, and we have a lot of Desi friends. Most of them are doctors, Their community is not like the Arab community. The Arab community, only the ones who didn't have, in the old times, only the ones who didn't have good means of living, did not have, came to the, came abroad to work. In their condition, they came recently, like about 30, 40 years they start coming, and they are more educated, and the more affluent came, So most of them were doctors, and I cannot tell you, every day they would call me, please make sure that you don't do this, make sure that you take such and such, ask your doctor in, ask my coordinator about such and such. And I went during that and saw my doctor the first time when she warned me, and the second time, or twice, I went during COVID, and they had so much precautions at the clinics and at the hospital where we did our,
It sounds like you had a lot of support, which is amazing.
Yes, thank goodness.
Even though you did have to isolate yourself for a period of time.
Yes.
It sounds like you were supported.
Yeah, and then, but we all lived together, and that was good, that we would prepare meals together and we would eat together. Usually, everyone is somewhere, and only me and my daughter, and even my daughter, she would stay with her help, but, most of the day. But, when this happened, we were all together, and it was fun, They would go, my daughter or my husband, they would go and bring the stuff, and I told you they would clean it in that, wipe it, and then they would come bring it to the sink and put all kind of stuff, and we would prepare meals together. It was not that bad, in our, but we did, one time we went out, and I had only one friend who would come to see us because, she was divorced and living by herself. And we told her, we knew that she didn't have COVID, or actually she had COVID in the beginning, and it was like really bad. She had to go to the hospital, but she was in New Jersey. And she was, after like 2 months or 3 months, she would start coming. And that was the only person that came. And then, one time we sat outside on the driveway, we saw our neighbors, an old neighbor, and our neighbor, and he came, and we sat like on a distance, and we talked, and also he was like having trouble because he wanted to he was also in the house with his wife all the time, and they would call for their everything, Yeah, or go pick it up, order it and pick it up, and and then we saw all other neighbors, everyone is hi.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a very communal culture, that you're
Yeah.
community likes to gather together.
Absolutely.
Do you find that now, once the restrictions were lifted and the the pandemic is not so strong, do you find that the community has been able to start gathering again?
Yes. This not this past month, it was the month of Holy Ramadan, Holy month of Ramadan. And not this one, the one before, the one when it strike, they decided that no, they didn't want anybody, not even people to go pray in the masjid, in the mosque. And then, the second year, it was not that bad, but they still did not approve. So we said that, it's been a while since we get together, so we're going to go, and they have like a field next to the masjid in South Carolina.
Okay.
I mean, in the beginning of, closer to North Carolina. And then, we decided to put tables and have dinner, because, every... like 3 days at least in the week, so we had like a communal, and we ordered food or we made food, and we sat, in the open air, and it was a little cold, but we still are okay. This year it was every day, but I didn't go every day, my husband went every day because of the prayers and his friends, and then he would go there and have and then go to another masjid and pray till like there are extra prayers that you have to do, and he would pray. So I mean this year, and then when it ended and the Eid came, the feast came, 5 or 6 people would invite us the same day, and it's the same people. Wow. And they say, you have to, so we had people inviting us for brunch and dinner, every day, almost like for a week, We're still celebrating.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you.
So before, to respect and to honor your time before we finish, is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
No, but I thank goodness that, we made it. It was very serious. It was a horrible time for everybody. And I'm thankful that we didn't lose more people. And I'm thankful for, all the doctors, all the nurses, all the health workers who really put their, efforts and lives on hold to help others, And for all the doctors who... passed away, especially the retired one who went and back, and I would learn about them in the news that somebody went back and they got COVID, and the hospitals were a nut house, and it was. I'm thankful that my friends, the doctors, made it, and. That's about it, and I'm also grateful to our Creator for lifting this misery.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing your
story. Oh, no
with
problem,
us.
no
We
problem.
appreciate